Raybird Ministries and Camp Raybird exist to bring the good news of Jesus Christ to the at-risk children and teens of the Michiana area. It all began a very long time ago. Raybird Ministries dates way back to the City Rescue Mission. The idea of the mission was formulated as an aftermath of the Billy Sunday evangelistic campaign here in South Bend in 1913. About this time, Melvin E. Trotter, an evangelist of Grand Rapids, Michigan, was invited as a speaker at a meeting in the Central Senior High School. During the meeting, Mr. Trotter succeeded in raising $2,900 to begin the work of the City Rescue Mission. Mr. Trotter made one more significant contribution to South Bend at that meeting. He recommended that Mr. and Mrs. Bird, then doing work in Chattanooga, Tennessee, be brought here to superintend the work of the new mission. Mr. Bird began his work as a door tender in a mission in a small Michigan town and was later asked to join in the missionary work. His travels took him to Los Angeles, where he met a wealthy businessman who was so impressed with Ray that he sponsored him in a course through the Moody Bible Institute. During his time at Moody, he met his wife, and together they went to Chattanooga before receiving the call to South Bend.
He was a gentleman in Excalibur, tall. He had a little forward motion to him, and I noticed he had long arms. He was very good at bringing something out and making sure that you understood what he said.
Mrs. Bird was a pleasant and thoughtful lady. She wrote a thank you note to one of the mission children. Frank, what a lovely surprise to receive a pair of silk hose from you. Thank you so much for such a lovely gift. I can't remember when I last wore silk hose, so you know how much I will enjoy wearing these. I hope by this time you have had a visit from Mary Mills. We are looking forward to seeing you soon. Yours in Christ, Mrs. Bird. It was on October 4th, 1906 that the Ray Bird he likes best was born. He heard Mel Trotter playing a hymn outside the grocery. The music led him to the local mission and Christianity. The first mission was at 115 East Jefferson and was open to meet the needs of the spiritually, morally, and physically needy. The South Bend Tribune called Bird one who brought hope to Skid Row derelicts. Mr. Bird held services every night at 7:30 targeting the down and outers. After 8 years, they outgrew their building on Jefferson and moved to 214 South Lafayette. As the mission grew, the need to help families grew. The new mission building had 3 floors that were used for its work, which included sewing classes, choir and orchestra, and children's and mothers' classes. To this building, a large auditorium with seating for almost 500 was later added. In the August of 1919, South Bend Lodge No. 235, Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks, erected a building at the Fresh Air Camp. Children were taken free of charge and given food, wholesome environment, recreation, and Christian teaching and training. The camp was bought and given to the mission by Mr. and Mrs. James Oliver II and Mr. and Mrs. C. Frederick Cunningham.
Yes, there were 10 in our family, and I'm the next to the youngest, and Esther's the baby. And my first memory of going to camp was when I was 3 years old, and probably the camp and the mission has had more influence on my life than anything else. I always get choked up when I think about it, because I remember the night that Esther and I were saved, and she was sick from her feet.
Marguerite told us, "My earliest memory is of Mr. Bird lifting me up on a table and reciting a little poem. Roses on my shoulder, slippers on my feet, I'm my mother's darling, don't you think I'm sweet? It made me feel so important." Each summer before we went to camp, we would meet at the City Rescue Mission, and a doctor would give us a physical in Mr. Bird's office. Then, in early years, we were taken out to camp in the back of a truck. In later years, we were taken to camp by the Interurban that ran right by the camp.
Morning, Levine Easton would always give us our verse for the day that we were supposed to memorize. And if we came to her after swimming, she would stand up there at the top of the steps. I think those steps are still there that go down to the lake. And she would stand there by those steps and hand everybody a graham cracker, and we would say our verse, and she would give us a star on our little card. And at the end of the week, she would give us all our cards. And I still remember some of those, only 223, 4 hours in, and some sure the glory of God. But we all look forward to the swimming in the afternoon. I think it was, I don't remember what time it was, but 3 o'clock maybe we went swimming. And they had a set amount of time that you could swim, you know, and then we had to get out. Well, we all just loved that swimming.
Every Friday, Mr. Bird would bring out his boat, put maybe 10 of us in the boat, start that engine, and we take a trip out to the lake. And he was very cautious. None of us had any life jackets or anything. And he stressed the point, now you must sit down. Don't put your hands in the water. You have to be still. Anyone that moves will just turn around and come back. We sat there like statues. He was very, very good about looking out for our safety. I remember distinctly him pitching the ball to us, you know, with the long arms, you know.
Casimir remarked that Mr. Bird was a clever man. He switched first and third bases. Because where we played south of the pump house next to the lake meant that overrunning the standard location of first base meant taking a swim. From the South Bend Tribune, circa 1948. Despite the fact that much of the camp was dedicated to play, Mrs. Bird and her helpers never lost sight of the fact that, quote, it is a Christian camp and the word of the Lord should be uppermost in the minds of the workers and the children, unquote. Mrs. Bird told the Tribune in an interview, there are morning devotions every morning, after which the children are given lessons in the cleanliness is next to godliness adage. Rooms are clean, beds are made, and play period follows. After the Bible hour, during which Bible verses are read and discussed, the choice treat of the day is ready, the swimming period. Marguerite wrote for us, but it wasn't only spiritual things that made a lasting impression on me. There were many subliminal messages, things like orderliness, the schedule, and the organization, and cleanliness. I still don't make my bed until after breakfast because I can hear Mrs. Bird telling us to throw our bed linens back when we get up in the morning and let them air out and then come back after breakfast and make our beds. Just inside the left-hand side of the dining room, as you'd entered it, was a huge sideboard, and the top of it was filled with books. When I was around 10 years old, I read all the Bobbsey twin books while I was at camp. Sometimes we would go pick raspberries for our meal, and Miss Aller, I believe her name was, would take us out on the hill for a story hour. Then there were always kids getting a ball game together outside, and inside the screened-in porch there was a row of wicker rockers along the back where the mothers and babies were sitting, and sometimes a few of the little girls. Most of the time the little girls would be sitting on the cement in front of the chairs sewing yo-yos to make pillow tops or playing jacks. It was always peaceful and quiet there. Mr. Bird wrote in a brochure explaining the camp, it goes without saying that we never have to go out after them when the big bell rings for meals, and when the blessing is said, they sure have a great time around the big tables with the well-cooked food served to them. We have our own garden where we raise all our vegetables such as potatoes, corn, beans, peas, tomatoes, beets, carrots, onions, cabbage, and radishes. We also have fresh fruit in season. In short, we try to raise all that we can use. It is very seldom that any go away from camp without gaining in weight. This has been made possible and is being maintained from year to year by our good friends who send us their gifts. This keeps this good work going for those who are in deep need of it and who will soon be the men and women of our city. We would be glad to hear from you. Signed, Ray A. Bird, Superintendent.
I can't remember anybody getting on a line other than doing something with the swings they had down there that they weren't supposed to. They would get on the swing and do things they weren't supposed to. He stressed the point that you could get hurt by doing that. So he was, like I say, he was good about looking out for the children at the camp.
Christmas was always a big deal at the City Rescue Mission.
And on Christmas Day, like she was saying, that was probably our biggest part of Christmas. We would go down there. I think it seemed to me like on Christmas Day it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they would give each of us a package. And it always had a cotton dress in it, and we always saved those for Easter Sunday. At Christmas, they would take all of us down to the Oliver Hotel for a big dinner. And we'd line up one of these great big tables, and I still remember it had a little glass dish full of cranberry sauce. And then when we went out, they would give us each a great big orange. That was a big occasion every year.
Every Christmas, Mr. Byrd promoted a City Rescue Mission Christmas Fund. The caption of this picture from the Tribune read, "Will there be empty stockings on Christmas morning? Not if you give generously to the City Rescue Mission Christmas Fund." The adjacent article read, "Use the coupon found on this page and send in your donation today. You will, won't you?" One Christmas, Lois Brayfield, a child of the mission, wrote the following poem. "I'd give you all a Christmas gift, not one of you I'd miss, but you see I'm short of cash, so I send you each a kiss." It goes without saying that over the years, the Byrds had a lot of helpers at the camp and the mission. There was Louine Easton, a little 4-foot lady with a hunchback.
What she did for me when I was a little tiny girl, every day she would cut out of a little rag a fancy hanky. You know how you fold a paper and cut little cutouts out of it? Every day she would give me one of those, a little hanky thing.
Golda Murley watched over the waterfront and taught campers how to swim. Carrie Hansen served faithfully in the kitchen. Floyd Hardy served as Mr. Byrd's assistant for a number of years. And Peter Michaels worked as Mr. Byrd's caretaker most of his life.
And Mr. Byrd said to my dad, says, "You can have the job as caretaker here if you'll attend the 3 o'clock Sunday service at the City Rescue Mission downtown." My dad couldn't, being a Catholic, was surprised. Dad couldn't see any reason why not. And so that's how he helped me get the job at City Rescue Mission camp, while being required to attend the services at 3 o'clock. And through attendance of the services and working at the camp, that's where my 2 brothers and sister and mother and dad were saved.
Despite the serious nature of the work at the camp, Mr. Byrd's workers took time out for fun too. The campers always had a fun time too, of course. No one looked forward to going home at the end of the week. A camper wrote the following words in a poem. "We thank the Byrds for all they've done, and the workers too, thanks everyone. We're sorry to leave, everything was swell. Now goodbye, we bid farewell." The time came eventually, too, for the Byrds to say farewell. The City Rescue Mission took on the name Teens Incorporated. Mr. Byrd wrote in a letter announcing his retirement, "Now let me tell you who Teens Inc. have as their director. Reverend George Phillips, a good businessman, a former youth pastor, and a Youth for Christ director, and I can highly recommend him to you. With his good wife, they will do a fine job." At the end of his letter of retirement, Mr. Byrd wrote the following. "Just one more word about the name of the camp. About 2 years ago, in one of our board meetings, one of the directors made a motion to change the name of the camp to Camp Ray Byrd, and even though I objected, it was carried and renamed as proposed." And so, George Phillips became the director of Camp Ray Byrd.
He was a guy who had the brain of a forever teenager, you know. I mean, in terms of his energy, his youthful outlook on life, his optimism, you know, to me the way he approached things when I knew him, he was just that kind of a guy. Tons of energy and tons of life. Oh, George always had a smile on his face, it seemed. I'm sure there were times he did, but when I think about him and remember him, that's what I remember. George with this big smile on his face and this energy that you could just feel exploding out of it.
George maintained his good sense of humor as he communicated with donors. In a brochure, he let campers speak for themselves. "Couldn't we sell our dog rags to help buy a new tractor? Man, it broke down 8 times, and Uncle George needs it or the garbage will pile up, and we won't have hay rides." "The ponies were tough. I think they liked me too. I write you a thank you very much note. I like to swim and the food very much. The only thing I don't like is when they get you up at 6:30 in the morning. The first day of camp, the doctor said I have athletics feet. That's why I was good at sports. I like the bows and arrows, but I always hit the hill. Next year I hope I hit the red circles." The counselors were wonderful, especially the blonde one. They helped us in many ways, such as learning about Christ.
You know, I remember at night praying for stuff that we didn't have. I remember specifically one night I remember that George wanted archery equipment, you know, and he'd just been wanting it really bad, and we prayed for it one night, and then the next night he came to tell us that within that 24-hour period, somebody had come and donated all of it. And of course, that was an incredible faith builder for those of us who are here. George was used to it all the time. You know, he'd pray for this one day, and he'd expect it to show up by Friday. And if he wasn't, he was disappointed with God. You know, I think. But you know, not being around that kind of environment, it was pretty neat to be exposed to that for the first time. And it was a real faith-building experience. Well, he just knew that a lot of the kids that came didn't have a lot to eat. A lot of the people he was ministering to, you know, were in situations where food wasn't as plentiful as some of us enjoyed. So that's one way he measured how much love was dispensed, I think, you know, is if they ate and gained some weight and they liked the food, he figured they must have had a good time, you know.
I don't think so. I was impressed enough that to get back from the meetings we had and the times out there, the campers very quickly came back as counselors, which means that to me was the proof that we were changing some lives and realizing that they were reaching people that I didn't have the skill to do. So I felt that the time and help that I could give them was worthwhile.
Steve Smoker shared with us, "The Gideons came to camp every Monday afternoon and presented each child with a New Testament. One of the saddest days of my life was one fall day when I learned one of my campers had died as a result of being given an aspirin overdose and beaten by his mother. Uncle George performed the funeral and the boy was buried with his most prized possession, his Gideon New Testament." On the last day of the last week of camp, the craft cabin lights went out. Try as he may, the electrician could not figure out how the building had power all summer. Worse yet, he said, there really should have been a fire. I overheard him saying, if there was power in this building this summer, I am telling you it was a miracle. George assured him that Camp Rayburn was a place where miracles happened all the time. Since the days of Rayburn, directors have come and gone, but the camp's mission has stayed the same. We are still preaching the good news of Jesus Christ, his power to forgive our sins and grant us eternal life, and add meaning to the lives we live now. The camp is still the same seemingly magical place where children love to come and hate to leave. As we teach about and demonstrate God's love, Camp Rayburn is making a difference. In so many ways, Camp Rayburn is still a place where miracles happen all the time.